Today we're getting into a book which claims to teach the techniques of the Fighting Commandos. Hi guys, my name is Joe and welcome to Fighting Words, the martial arts library. On this channel I review martial arts books and talk about other martial arts related subjects. So the subject for today's review is Lessons from the Fighting Commandos. The author is Fred Neff. The book was published in 1995. As far as the author goes, Mr. Neff's primary background is karate. It says he also has a background in Kempo and is proficient in judo and jiu-jitsu, although it doesn't suggest that he has instructor level ranks in those. Now, the preface of this book begins with the author discussing his uncle who actually served in World War II and how his uncle got him into things like boxing. Following that is a chapter on the history of commandos, and the history here, I gotta say, is a little bit dubious. The author seems to be reaching back into history and perhaps mythology, touching on everything from the Trojan horse to the ninja. Itself is sort of a point of controversy even in modern times. Chapter 2 is in a question and answer format. I generally like this format. The author, in this case, has chosen to include questions about commandos and ninjas. Chapter 3 is basic principles, and I think this is actually an alright chapter. These principles will include such things as use natural weapons and have a plan before you act. And each of these gets a short little paragraph that it sort of elaborates on. In chapter 4, we get into some of the physical fundamentals. The author includes several stretches as well as break falls. In other words, a way to land from a fall so that you reduce the risk of injury to yourself. And it also includes a chart with various weak points listed on it. Chapter 5 is on stance, footwork, and some upper body movements. The stances that are shown are the ready stance, the straddle stance, also known as a horse stance or side horse stance, and the guard stance, which is more or less a boxing position. The footwork is very rudimentary. It actually includes some circling movements where the author crosses his feet over the other, which is generally considered kind of a no-no for footwork. The next two chapters are sort of paired. The first one is on defenses against strikes from long range, and the next is defenses against strikes from close range. Now, these defenses are typically shown to be traditional karate blocks, and the returning strikes are primarily what we might call kickboxing. Jab, cross, hook, round kick, side kick, things like that. You'll notice that I didn't mention a chapter before this where the blocks and strikes were actually presented individually before we actually got into their use. So I don't think that that's a good thing to have in here. Following that is a chapter on prolonged fighting situations. And it's combinations. That's what it is. Offensive combinations, whereas before we had the participants were blocking an attack before beginning their own counterattack. In this case, it's here are combinations to throw. There are no blocks included. The next chapter, chapter 9, shows escapes from various grabs. It also shows a few throws and some pain-reliant techniques. These include things like, if somebody has grabbed you, take your thumbs and drive them underneath the guy's jaw. Like not addressing the grab at all. You do get some standard traditional martial arts grappling techniques here, like wrist locks, standing arm bars, and as I mentioned, you get a few throws. They are all done in response to a grab. Again, they are not shown in isolation beforehand. The next chapter, chapter 10, is on ground fighting, Primarily, it shows defenses against pins and grounded chokes, usually throttle choke. It includes some wrestling style breakdowns as well as reversals. A breakdown meaning your opponent is on their hands and knees and you flatten them out on their belly. Not sure how this works for self-defense. Self-defense, usually the objective is to get away. It does show some arm bars, like some Juji Gatame style arm locks. Although I have to say, they are lacking a bit. They rely more on the momentum of the leg as opposed to shifting the hips in the correct position, and I am dubious of their success rate. Now, Chapter 11 is on different kinds of strategies, including facing people of different body types or different types of fighters. For instance, somebody going for a knockout, somebody who throws a lot of high kicks, things like that. It ends with a chapter on how to practice safely, as well as an index and a biography on the author. The descriptions are actually quite clear. You get a lot of very well described techniques in here. The overall general information is pretty good. While I'm not really a fan of how he framed some of the strategy section, I do think that in general it's pretty good as far as what it's actually describing. And some of the ground reversals are okay. Most of them, to be fair. As far as the cons go, as I mentioned, the history section is actually pretty dubious. There are spotty elements to the grappling. A lot of the throws are shown without a prior off-balancing technique, for instance, and I mentioned how the straight arm locks were poorly executed. And I'm not a fan of the fact that there was no basic striking instruction before we got into, by the way, punch him in the face. Okay, can we learn how to punch first? As far as recommendations go, I feel bad because Mr. Neff's books are sentimental favorites of mine. I checked him out at the library when I was growing up. This might be his weakest one yet. I think if you can find it for free and you have no other resource for self-defense, this is sort of, you're desperate and this is the only thing you can get to. That's sort of where I am with this. As I mentioned, there are things here that might work. I'm not a fan of the grappling stuff. The striking combinations are okay. But it's difficult for me to recommend this to anyone who is earnestly concerned about their ability to defend themselves. Even the parts that I like, for instance, going over the principles and, strategy for different kinds of fighters, it's not worth getting the book for those little sections, to be frank. So, I don't want this to sound like an anti-recommendation, but I just think there are too many other resources that do the job that this book is trying to do, but much better. Well, that's all I have for this week. If you like my video, please leave a like. If you want to see more videos like this, I release long-form videos on Friday. Most of them are book reviews. Feel free to subscribe. If you would like to request a book for me to review, please consider donating to my Ko-fi account. You can also donate if you just want to help out my channel, because I don't get paid for this. and I need to buy more books. And again, thank you for following along with me, and have a good one.